recording this. And if anybody objects to the recording, does not want to be part of the recording, you may leave now. If you continue to participate, you hereby agree to allow the museum to use the recording and publish it on its social media, as well as and including its YouTube channel. Thank you very much. Krista, are you ready for the introduction?
Sure. So welcome, everyone. I'm Krista Bruin, programming volunteer with the Palestine Museum, and we're just honored to have this hybrid event today, Madafa conversation with Jonathan Kuttab, who is the co-founder of Nonviolence International and also the human rights organization Al-Haq. It goes all the way back to the first Intifada. He's a well-known international human rights attorney, graduate of University of Virginia Law School. He practices in the US, Israel, and Palestine. And he's currently serves as the executive director of FASNA, which is the Friends of Sabeel North America. He also headed the legal committee negotiating the Cairo Agreement of 1994 between Israel and the PLO. He is a resident of East Jerusalem and has a law firm there. And he's had articles that have appeared in Middle East Institute, Arab News, Arab Center, Washington, D.C., Al Jazeera, the Electronic Intifada, and many more. He's really a well-known speaker on envisioning the future of how we can envision the future in Israel and Palestine. And of course, his book, Beyond the Two-State Solution, directly addresses that. He also has a brand new memoir out, The Truth Shall Set You Free, the story of a Palestinian human rights lawyer working for peace and justice in Palestine and Israel. Without further ado, we'll get started with today's special hybrid event here at the Palestine Museum. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Krista. Tfaddal. Just make sure you stay close to the computer. Yes. So people can hear you. This should be good. And make sure your picture is good.
Yeah. Well, thank you for.
Hello, Jonathan. Welcome.
Thank you for that kind introduction, and thanks to the museum for hosting this event. Those of you who are here and those of you who are online, I think this is a very important topic that we need to address today. I gather most of you are quite familiar with the situation in Israel-Palestine today. So I'm not going to be giving you a lot of new information or new facts that are not known to you because I think you're quite well informed. What I would try to emphasize today and concentrate, and we'll have a chance to discuss that also in questions and answers eventually, is what does this mean on a much broader level? What does it mean on the moral issue? What does it mean for international law? What does it mean for other people, for the world community as we move ahead? Because what is happening is in fact a unique experience. What is happening is in fact the moral issue of the time, for at least for three major reasons that I will be talking about. The first, obviously, is that this has come right on the heels of the situation in the Ukraine. The situation in the Ukraine is significant because, for once, the United States found itself in a situation, and much of the Western world also, in Europe especially, where international law, human rights law, the laws of occupation, the laws of warfare, the laws of sovereignty are so clearly on their side of the fence. And so there was a huge attempt to say that what Putin was doing is clearly against international law, that the international community has a duty to act collectively in a certain way, that Putin himself needed to be named as a war criminal, as a violator of international law. Warrants had to be issued against him. The International Criminal Court had to start acting the way it's supposed to act. Europe has to work collectively to prevent this violation from taking place. The attack was considered to be unprovoked, illegal, illegitimate in international terms and in terms of international law and human rights. Right on the heel of that, Israel starts acting, and it's clearly acting in violation of human rights, clearly acting in violation of the norms of warfare, clearly acting against a civilian population, clearly calls for a similar parallel response. And yet, the United States and the Western countries were very, very, very reluctant to apply the exact same standards to Israel that they were applying to Putin. So the blatancy of the hypocrisy was such that it created a crisis. Does international law still exist? Does it apply? Are there any standards that should be applied across the board to friend and foe alike? Or is there an exception for Israel and for the United States? The thing about morality is that it is based on principles of morals, not on who happens to be more powerful, who happens to be my friend, who happens to be my enemy. So the fact that this situation came so closely on the heels of the Ukrainian situation presented a moral dilemma. That is the first reason. The second reason, and it's perhaps a much more powerful one, is that the genocide that is taking place in Gaza today, despite the attempts to hide it from the international media, the fact that the BBC was very complicit, openly complicit. We've seen internal documents that said certain terms were not to be used. You're not supposed to refer to genocide, to apartheid. You are required to question the facts that everybody can see. You are required to say, anytime you're quoting figures from the Palestinian Health Ministry, that this is a Hamas controlled health ministry, as if to suggest that you shouldn't accept their facts, even though their facts were very clear and understated, that the figures that they were given were only for verified losses, naming the age, the sex, gender, the identity card number of each of the victims, who are now over 55,000, and not mentioning all those who are buried under the rubble or who are missing. So they're really actually understating the figures. Never mind. You are required as an international news agency or as an American news agency to downplay the figures. You are required not to see what is happening. Your reporters, international reporters especially, are banned, prohibited from entering Gaza to photograph what's happening in real lifetime. You can only report through your Jerusalem office after passing Israeli censorship. Not only is the international media complicit in this way, but also there was a deliberate targeting of Palestinian reporters and journalists. Over 220 of them had been killed, sometimes together with members of their family. The number of reporters who were killed are greater than reporters who have been killed or journalists who have been killed during the Civil War, the First World War, the Second World War, Vietnam War, Korean War, the two Iraq wars, all put together. A greater number of journalists have been targeted and killed. Despite that fact, because of social media, the facts of the genocide are clearly known now all over the world. This genocide was taking place in real time, being videoed and broadcast 24/7, so that there was no ability to pretend that this is not happening. Even while the mainstream media is still downplaying it, denying it, coloring it in a certain way, refusing to use the word genocide, refusing to talk about the civilian casualties, refusing to talk about the targeting of journalists, the targeting of each and every hospital in the Gaza Strip, the targeting of all universities in Gaza, the targeting of all food distribution, bakeries, centers, etc. Despite all that, this genocide is well known and taking place. You know, when the Holocaust took place in Germany, it took place in the dark. Many people, including Germans, claimed, perhaps rightly or wrongly, that they didn't know it was happening until after the war. In this case, there is no deniability, there is only denial. There is only a deliberate, ignorant refusal to accept the reality. The third element, actually a separate element of under number 2, is the open statements by Israeli officials, from the president to the prime minister to the minister of defense to the head of the army to journalists to anchor people at every level of Israel, chief rabbis, commentators, anchormen at every level of Israeli power structure. Statements were made that were clearly on their face genocidal. We want to kill them all. We want to destroy Gaza completely. There are no innocent people there. We have to destroy them, all of them. And the them does not only refer to Hamas, it refers to all Gazans. The policy is to prevent humanitarian aid from going in, openly calling for cutting off food and water and medical supplies, and openly stating, this is what we're doing. We're cutting off all food. So never before have we seen this level of open genocidal language, not to mention the Amalek function, which I will talk about later, which is a commandment in the Torah calling for genocide, calling for killing men, women, children, and even animals. This reference to Amalek as a commandment in the Torah happily has been repudiated by almost all Jewish rabbis throughout history, that this commandment is no longer operative. The commandment of genocide, Amalek, killing entirely a people. However, that's been revived now in Israel by not only rabbis, but by secular people like Netanyahu himself, who's not a religious person. And he says, the Bible tells us how to deal with these people. They are Amalek. They have to be destroyed. Okay. Third element, very important. This has been the first time when international law and international courts and judges have been deliberately targeted by the criminals. It's never happened before, ever. It started with Netanyahu saying, if international law is against us, we will change international law. Followed by the statements and actions of the United States, targeting the prosecutors and the judges of the International Criminal Court. Not only with threats against them, which the Israeli Mossad has been making those threats, but also passing legislation to freeze their assets, prevent them from coming into the United States, and openly saying, we will prosecute the judges, the prosecutors, and all those who are collecting evidence and bringing cases against Israel and the United States, but mostly it is Israel, and telling the International Criminal Court, as well as the International Court of Justice, that this is what we will do to you if you bring actions against the state of Israel and its people. So that the warrants that are issued by the International Criminal Court, after a long wait, after many threats, the previous prosecutor of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, was literally threatened with her life and with her family if she would bring action against Israel. Finally, she did bring action during the last few months before she left office. And the new prosecutor, when he started issuing these warrants, was told that you have to step aside. There are some questions about your sexual conduct, so that they would suspend all the ongoing investigations. And now the ICJ itself, I must explain to you, the International Criminal Court is one court where Israel thought these are the ones that are going to be coming after us. They didn't expect that the International Court of Justice, which is a different court that only deals in disputes between countries, they didn't realize that South Africa would bring a court action against them for the crime of genocide, which is the ongoing action that you may have heard about. But I want to step back a little and say this is the first time ever in the history of international law when the law itself and the courts themselves and the judges and the prosecutors themselves came under threats and came under attack when the state of Israel and its main supporter, the United States, would actually tell them, we will create sanctions and punishments against you for being judges and for going after Israel for the crimes of genocide and apartheid and other war crimes. Many people started saying, does international law mean anything anymore? Is this the end of international law? I've heard many people say, the Palestinian people will somehow survive, but will international law survive? Will international morality survive? Because international law actually is not lacking in enforcement mechanisms. People say, oh, international law doesn't have enforcement. It does have enforcement. But the enforcement requires states to act. States are required to take action to enforce the judgments of the international courts. States are required to act to ensure compliance with international law. And these states now are under a lot of attack. There is a small group of 9 states called the Hague Group that have gotten together to try and create some enforcement of international law. But by and large, the United States and most of the European countries have used their considerable weight to threaten and prevent countries from taking any action against those who violate international law. The recent war with Iran is a very important example because in this case, Israel's attacks on Iran were truly unprovoked, were truly contrary to international law. Iran was not attacking or preparing to attack Israel. International law makes it very clear that the crime of aggression, breaking the peace, attacking another country is illegal. The only way you can do it is self-defense. Well, Israel says this is preemptive self-defense. Well, not really. Because preemptive self-defense, even if we are going to accept it, requires that the state that is about to attack you, that there is an imminent danger of an attack by that state, which cannot be stopped by any other means. So when Israel attacked Iran, and later when the United States attacked Iran, it was a clear act of aggression that is not justified under international law. Or you say, but there's another justification. We're trying to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Well, that's what the nuclear non-proliferation treaty was created for, to prevent other countries from using nuclear energy for militarized purposes. Iran signed that treaty and accepted a most rigorous inspection regime and was actually engaged in discussions to even have even more rigorous inspections because Iran says we don't want a nuclear weapon. There is a fatwa saying that that's an awful thing not to be used. But Israel decided to attack them. They did not sign the non-proliferation treaty themselves. And the United States also attacked. So the question that is before us now is a very serious one. Because you have to understand how international law operates and how it develops. There are certain principles in international law from time immemorial. For example, you're not supposed to attack civilians. You're not supposed to attack people who raise the white flag. You're not supposed to kill captives, even if they are soldiers. You're supposed to treat the wounded soldiers. At the end of World War II, people realized that the world has progressed so much and weaponry is so destructive these days that you need to have some rules. You need to have some treaties and conventions. You need to have some mechanism to prevent the worst abuses. That's why the Geneva Conventions were created. They were actually created by the generals of the armies who won World War II to try and put some limits. How do you behave with a civilian population that comes under your control? How do you behave with respect to hospitals, with respect to civilians, with respect to wounded soldiers? The mechanisms that were created after World War II included the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, included a number of conventions. One of them is the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, which is the basis for the South African case against Israel. There were other conventions also for the protections of the rights of the child, for the protection of women, a whole number of other, I don't want to mention them all. But I'm saying the very architecture of international law grew and became much more firm and much more clear after World War II. And the United States was one of the countries that helped that development. The last 10 or 20 years, the United States has taken a back seat, in fact, has tried to prevent the further development of international law, including the creation of the International Criminal Court, which the United States did not want to accept. And they pressured countries not to join. When countries joined, and enough of them joined that it became law, they entered into bilateral treaties with any country that receives aid from the United States, which is like many, many tens of countries, dozens of countries, that they would not bring any action against the United States or its citizens before the ICC. Israel doesn't enjoy such bilateral treaties with countries not to bring action against it. Okay. To summarize, where are we today? Today, we are in a situation where there is a major attack on international law itself. Through the hypocrisy of the West, as I said, especially after the Ukraine, through the presence of clear evidence of an ongoing genocide that is taking place before our eyes, that cannot be denied, through the current, I would say, war against international law and international courts, people have to act. Different countries have to act, and civil society in each country must pressure their own governments to act. That is why boycotts, divestments, and sanctions are absolutely essential. When the government doesn't do enough, the people have to force the government to act. That is why Israeli soldiers, commanders, and politicians need to be arrested, questioned, interrogated, and tried in different countries, not only before the ICC and the ICJ. Right now, in Australia and New Zealand, any Israeli who goes to these countries gets questioned at the border. Some of them have to fill in a 13-page questionnaire. Have you served in the Israeli army? In what function? In what location? At what time? We want to know if you're a war criminal or not. People in Spain are saying, if Israelis come into our country, we want to know, are they war criminals or not? Because crimes against humanity, including genocide and apartheid, and war crimes carry with them universal jurisdiction, which means every country has jurisdiction to try those people. There are outstanding warrants against Netanyahu and Gantz. More warrants should have been coming, and I think will be coming. Many of these warrants remain under seal until you catch the criminal, and then you reveal the existence of these warrants. In Israel today, they try at least to hide the identity of pilots in the Air Force, precisely for fear of their being persecuted in other countries. There is a lot that we can do in different countries to urge our governments to act against war criminals. Not because it's good for Palestine and Palestinians, not because it is bad for Israelis, but because law is useful for all of us. We all need international law. I'll tell you something. Those who think that they are doing a favor to their Jewish neighbors by downplaying or refusing to deal with the crimes of the state of Israel are wrong. Because, in fact, the issue is not Jews or non Jews. To the contrary, I am proud that Jewish people in this country are among the best allies and the critics of the behavior of the Israeli army. Because eventually, when things change, and they will change, the backlash that we are going to see from real Jew haters and anti Semites, including in this country, is going to be great. If you think that the Christian nationalists and the Proud Boys and the Trump supporters who are defending Israel today love Jews, you are mistaken. They will turn again and show great hatred, racism, and discrimination against Jewish people. And it will be up to good, decent people who believe in human rights, who believe in international law, to defend them, to defend Jews, just like they need to defend Muslims now, who are being targeted even in this country by the haters. Because you see, the beauty about law, the beauty about international law, the beauty about human rights is that it is based on universal principles that should apply across the board to everybody. International law is international law, whether we like it or not, whether it favors our people or whether it doesn't. You know, we are not like Natan Sharansky. You know, Natan Sharansky used to be one of my heroes. When he was fighting for the right of Jews to leave the Soviet Union on the basis of Article 14 of the Universal Declaration. That article gives the right of every person to leave any country, including his own, and to return to it. I used to think this guy is wonderful. He is great. He is a fighter. When he was finally released from the Soviet Union, he was told to go in a straight line across the bridge or whatever to West Germany. And instead, he went in a zigzag fashion. I said, that's the kind of fighting spirit I love. He went to Israel. I wanted to meet him because I wanted to see, will he fight for the right of Palestinians to return to Palestine? Not interested. Turns out he's a Zionist, a right-wing fascist. He does not believe in Palestinian rights. Human rights for him was a tool to be prostituted in serving his cause, not to be applied to other people. That's not international law, and that's not human rights. As a human rights person, I can tell you, I believe human rights and human rights law applies to everybody. When we say you shouldn't target civilians, we don't only talk about Palestinians, we talk about Israelis, we talk about everybody. When we say you should protect journalists, you protect journalists, including those that you don't like. When we say that hospitals should not be bombed, something that basic, we don't just mean Palestinian hospitals, we also mean Israeli hospitals. It is not a justification that there are some wounded Israeli soldiers in that hospital. Does not give me the right to bomb that hospital and everybody around it. When we say you should not target civilians, that also includes Israeli civilians and everybody else. When we say war crimes should not be carried out, we mean not only by Israel, but also by Arabs and also by Iranians and also by Americans and also by Russians, by everybody. International law means nothing if we're not willing to apply it across the board. This is the moral challenge of our time. Do we want to? Do we believe in human rights and international law? Or do we give up and accept the law of the jungle? Whoever is powerful can do whatever they want and get away with it. Thank you. I understand we are now open to discussion or questions. I don't know if anybody is monitoring the questions that come online, but certainly we. Okay, so we can.
I'm doing that, but why don't you start there in the museum, and then we can get to the Zoom questions.
Thank you. We'll do that. Okay, anybody here has any questions they would like to raise to start the conversation? No.
I have a question that I have long wanted to have answered. So when things happened in October of 2023, and then things started to unfold, there were some French human rights lawyers who said, Gaza, we are going to fight for you. We will make sure that you are protected. And I told my husband, who is Palestinian, and he said, nothing will come of that. And nothing came of that. And I'm just wondering, why does nothing come of any of these wonderful human rights lawyers who are trying to do something? Why did nothing come of the International Court of Justice? Why did nothing come from these French lawyers? What happens?
Could we repeat the question for the audience?
The question is right after October 7, this lady's husband told her, don't worry, there are French lawyers who are active in human rights who will make sure nothing happens in Gaza, that the Gazan civilian population is protected, that international law is respected. And she's saying he didn't expect anything to come of it, and in fact, nothing came of it. International law was not applied. Basically, you are posing the same question that I posed in this lecture. The reason, and let's face it, is that there are powerful forces in this country, in Europe, and elsewhere who are willing to defend the actions of the State of Israel, regardless of international law, and to punish anybody who would try to demand accountability. Those who even called for a ceasefire in this country were themselves attacked, maligned, and even criminalized. When the students in this country rose up with the encampments, there was a deliberate attempt to punish the students, the faculty, and even the universities who allowed their activities. So there are powerful forces who are trying to prevent international law from being implemented. I don't think they will have the last word. I still believe in international law. And I still believe that good, decent people throughout the world will not allow this kind of evil to continue. But that's also our duty. We can't just wait. You know, you talk about the arc of history, we are told, bends towards justice. But we have to also help it along and bend the arc. There's an organization called Bend the Arc. So we have to do our job to bend the arc and speed up the application of international law. You're welcome.
Hi. Sorry, no, this gentleman should.
Go ahead.
because I haven't thought one question out fully.
Go ahead.
Talking about Iran, are there special laws against international laws against attacking nuclear areas, like a nuclear power plant
Yes.
or a nuclear
The question,
facility that's enriching uranium?
Yes.
Is there special laws?
the question is, are there any rules in international law against attacking nuclear facilities, presumably that are doing civilian nuclear work? And the answer is yes.
They're enriching uranium for who knows what purpose?
No. The question refers to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. You see, Non-Proliferation Treaty was based on the premise that nuclear power and energy is important. Countries need to develop it for medical reasons, for energy reasons, and for scientific reasons. That you can't just have a few powers that control nuclear technology. So the Non-Proliferation Treaty says, okay, we will allow you to have this technology under strict conditions. Part of that, the facilities that we inspect, where we know what's happening, where we know what's going on, will themselves be protected. They cannot be attacked. They will be treated as civilian institutions and installments and not be targeted. They should be protected. I think it was the Koreans who perhaps abused this and started enriching and ended up with nuclear weapons. So when Iran joined the Non-Proliferation Treaty, they plugged in all the loopholes and tried to make it very, very difficult for Iran to enrich or to achieve nuclear weapons. See, to achieve nuclear weapons, you need a number of steps. Enriching uranium to weapons grade 90% is one of these elements. There are other elements also in the equation. And Iran was probably in violation of the enrichment provision by going up from 20 to 60, which they, by the way, they did in response to some actions by the Israelis against it, targeting its scientists and refusing to carry out the provisions of their treaties. So in response, I'd say, I think it's a good thing to prohibit nuclear weapons. We don't need nuclear weapons. We need to get rid of the existing nuclear weapons, whether it's by Israel or the US or the USSR. We don't need nuclear weapons. Nobody needs nuclear weapons. The only possible justification, and I don't buy it, is as a counterbalance, because your enemies have it, you want to have it, and create mutual assured destruction. MAD, MAD. You want to create a MAD between yourself and your enemies, and that's why you have it. That's what Russia and America have. Mutual assured destruction. Does Iran need MAD against Israel? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think nuclear weapons are ever a good idea. But let's talk about it. Let's prevent nuclear weapons from everybody. Let's force Israel to put its own nuclear facilities under inspection, not just Iran's. Nobody dares to talk about that, and haven't all these years. Every time, if I was Iran, I would never allow anybody to talk about anything nuclear without talking about Israel. When Israel has threatened Iran, made it very clear that they want to threaten it. And it's funny because Israeli journalists and commentators are very clear. They don't want to stop Iran from being nuclear because they're afraid that they will use it against them. No, they want to preserve their monopoly. They want Iran to be too weak to prevent them from controlling the area. The goal is not to preserve Israeli existence, but to preserve Israeli monopoly and hegemony and superiority over the area.
Why haven't the international organizations challenged that, the IAEA, and why have no countries challenged Israel on that score as far as their own hypocritical use of and proliferation of
Because there are, the question is, why haven't these countries acted in accordance to international law? The only answer I can give is that there are powerful forces in each of these countries that make it very difficult to act against Israel. I can tell you in this country why. In this country, there seems to be an unspoken exception for Israel. In this country, it's because money plays a role in politics, which it shouldn't. In this country, it is very clear that the majority of the people in this country don't want a war with Iran, even among Republicans, even among the Jewish people in this country. There is no support for the kind of policies that Israel carries out. But there are powerful forces with lots of money and lots of influence that will not allow that to become the policy of the government of the United States. That may change someday. And when it does, Israel will be left exposed to deal with international law. Right now, the US is giving a diplomatic umbrella to Israel to do whatever it wants, despite international law. If that umbrella gets removed, Israel will have to face the music. And the music includes international law, international public opinion, the Arab world, the Muslim world, the decent people throughout the world who really don't want its policies to carry out. Remember, the last month of Barack Obama, there was a resolution that was brought before the Security Council condemning settlements. It was a very mild resolution. And the United States, instead of vetoing it like they always do, the United States abstained. And that resolution was passed 14-0 to 1 abstention. There was no veto. In Israel, they went berserk. They went crazy. What do you mean? This is a knife in our back. We're counting on the US to always use the veto in our interest, regardless. Because they need that protection against international law, at least in the Security Council. And that one time they didn't get it. Will that happen again? Will the US again refrain from using its veto? Maybe. I think it will. And when that happens, I think Israel will have to face the music.
So you said that the states, the individual states are required to implement,
Correct.
to enforce
Correct.
international
To
law,
ensure compliance.
ensure compliance.
First article in the Geneva Convention says each of the high contracting party shall ensure compliance with these provisions.
So the man who is quite likely to be the next mayor of New York, Zoran Mamdani,
Yes,
has said that if Netanyahu
Right.
sets foot in New York City, he will be arrested.
correct.
Does the international law, does the framework have any way of dealing with conflict within the country that might arrest him, given that would, given what would happen in the United States if he got arrested?
No, international law usually deals with states, not with individuals. Whether a particular state follows or doesn't follow international law there's an obligation under international law to follow it, but it's up to the citizens of that country to make sure that their country follows through with their obligations under international law.
So thank you for your attention to international law and sharing everything. As you say, we are responsible for bending the arc. And I feel that, but how can we when, as you know, the US umbrella, there's no red line for Israel, they can do anything and we will stand by them. So how do we, if we don't have power and if I'm not an international lawyer,
Yeah.
how do I bend the arc?
Again, the answer is
Jonathan, be sure to just repeat the question because it's hard for us to hear here on
right,
Zoom.
right.
Thank you.
The question is, if a certain country doesn't follow international law, like in the United States, there are all these red lines, and there's this unspoken exception for Israel. What can we do? And my answer is the same, which I started with. BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. We must make life miserable for Israelis, as well as for our own politicians who fail to apply international law. Acting nonviolently, of course, maybe even acting with civil disobedience, breaking the law if we have to ensure compliance. Recently in Philadelphia, they had a people's tribunal where they actually carried out a whole day of evidence against both the US government and particularly Senator Fetterman for his support for genocide, and brought the evidence and demanded that he be tried for complicity in the crime of genocide. There's a group that meets outside his office and sometimes his home once every week, Fridays at Fetterman. Every week. It's been 83 weeks, rain or shine. They go out, and they may be contributing to his having a nervous breakdown these days, because they are consistent, they are principled. There are actually more Jews there than there are non-Jews who are calling on that senator, who is supposedly a Democrat, and many people voted for him, myself included, thinking that he was a progressive, and we were thoroughly disappointed. So people can do something. Governments don't act in a vacuum. And if governments don't act according to law or according to what we feel is the right thing, maybe we have to resort to civil disobedience. At least we have to resort to boycotts and divestments. How many cities, how many countries, how many unions actually buy Israeli bonds, which means they are contributing directly to the Israeli economy? How many of them have arms industries which supply the Israelis with weapons? How many of them host Israeli institutions, academic institutions, which are complicit in the ongoing genocide? They need to be boycotted. They need to have sanctions. We have sports coming up. We have the FIFA tournaments coming up in the United States. Throughout the world now, whenever the Israelis show up to play soccer, the fans get up and say, you know, this is genocide, you know, get away, we don't want you, we don't believe you, we don't accept you. Sports provide an avenue for boycotts and for sanctions. And frankly, Israel is more worried about being kicked out of FIFA than they are about all the economic boycotts that are taking place against it. That's, by the way, how apartheid fell in South Africa. It wasn't so much the economic pressure. It was that sports that in the end, you know, really had an effect and an impact on people in South Africa.
Jonathan, I wonder if we can take a few questions from Zoom land here.
Yes.
we have a lot of questions. I'm trying to just summarize them into a couple of short paragraphs. So I'm going to just read that and you can decide what you want to address. And I'm sorry if I haven't gotten to everyone's specific question, but I've tried to kind of combine them. So there's a lot of interest about this collapse of international law. And you talk about it being challenged at the state level through efforts like BDS. And so there's concern about whether the collapse of international law has actually created more violence on the international stage, and if international law is even viable if war is always an option. And in the meantime, how do we stop a genocide when there's this ongoing process of ethnic cleansing and killing of Palestinians and displacement? Some people are specifically interested in the dwindling Christian population in Palestine. And is there any role for the UN police or other international body to protect Palestinians or create some kind of space for people to catch their breath? And what do we do about this ongoing unconditional support of the United States for Israel that allows this to continue? I know that's a mouthful, but just kind of see where you would like to take all those questions. Thank you so much.
Okay. Where do I start with answering these questions? The first question is, how do we stop an ongoing genocide while it's taking place? Frankly, the only way we can physically stop that right now is to get some food into Gaza. Unfortunately, the Egyptian army has not allowed, the Egyptian regime has not allowed, has been threatened. They could not allow people to come in. So that's where the flotilla came in. People came by ship, by boats, and so far they have failed. And the idea was, if instead of one boat, you had 1,000 boats coming in, the Israeli army would be under a very great pressure to do something. Right now, they are feeling the pressure, but not enough. That's why they came up with this idea of the Gaza humanitarian group, which is really weaponizing food. Oh, we'll let food in, but we'll do it in our way to help bring everybody down from the north to the south and make them accountable to us, where we check every person who picks up the food, where they need our permission every time. I think, there's a group of veterans that are fasting outside the United Nations. I joined them for a few days. We need more people to take action where, how can we eat when somebody is being starved to death deliberately? Not that they are starving, they are being starved to death. I think if enough people say this is unacceptable, we will do something about it. Maybe there has to be a strike or a demonstration inside the cafeteria at the U.S. Senate. How can you eat when you're not allowing food to go in to other people? Yeah, you may be arrested, but how many people can they arrest? We need to talk about the press, which are complicit, about the television, which is complicit. Maybe we need to pick it outside the TV stations. How come you are not covering it? People are being starved to death. We cannot accept this. I understand there was some action here about trying to do a flotilla.
It's going to be on July 12th in.
In 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks, there is a flotilla that's going to be enacting what is happening in Gaza here. I think there needs to be more clear demonstrations with a lot of political pressure. Sorry, we need to demonstrate outside churches. Why are you quiet? dare I say, outside synagogues. Why are you quiet? People in your name are starving people. Is this acceptable to you? How does this square with your values as Jews, as Christians, as Muslims, outside mosques? Why are Muslims quiet and silent? How dare they be quiet and silent when this is taking place? So, yes, we do have tools of nonviolence that we need to use to bring up. This is why this is the moral issue of our generation. The silence is deafening and totally unacceptable. See, another question. People concerned about the dwindling Christian population. It's interesting. Gaza used to have about 2,000 Christians. It now has about 800. Most of them are hiding in two churches, including one church that's one of the oldest in Christendom. That was attacked by the Israelis. The Pope of blessed memory used to call that church every night and ask about their health and pray with them. Many people in Gaza think that's the only reason that Christians have survived in Gaza to this day. The Pope himself, unlike the Catholic bishops in this country, the Pope himself took an interest in their plight. Because the Zionist movement, don't let them fool you. They don't care for Christians more than they do for Muslims. They like to present the fight as if it's Judeo-Christian versus Muslim. But they don't care for Palestinian Christians, for their property, for their institutions, for their presence in the land any more than they do for the Muslim presence in these areas. This is not a religious war. And we should not allow them to make this Jews versus others. I thank God every day for principled Jewish people. I call them the righteous Jews who are standing up against this genocide, sometimes at great risk to themselves, sometimes being ostracized by their families, by their friends. They are really paying a price, but they are standing for it because they are Jews, because of their Jewish values. They say this is against Judaism, this is against our interests as Jews. We will not allow Zionism and the state of Israel and the right-wing Netanyahu government speak for us and in our name. Another question is UN police. There is a mechanism for UN police to act against a rogue regime that clearly violates international law. Unfortunately, the actions by the United Nations usually fall under the authority of the Security Council under Chapter 7 of the Charter. Chapter 7 of the Charter has a veto power to all the 5 permanent members. As I mentioned before, so far, the United States has been using that veto power to support Israel. I don't think they will always do it. A time will come with a crazy president like we have now, when he chooses for God knows whatever reason to not to use the veto, when he gets upset enough with Netanyahu and say enough is enough, who knows? Maybe for all the wrong reasons, maybe to help the Gulf people and pass something that they want. I mean, Trump has no problem taking somebody like a Shara who was on the CIA's most wanted list with $10 million on his head and who was an Al-Qaeda person, and not only accept him and legitimize him, but also lift all the sanctions against Syria in order to please Prince Salman. And he says, see, Prince, what won't I do for you? He's willing to do it when his own interest requires it. He's willing to go against U.S. interests and to, I think he would also be willing to throw Israel under the bus if he needs to, when his own interests call for it. I know that's not very
And
encouraging. We like him to do it for a good reason, for a just reason, because international law requires it and decency and common sense requires it. But sometimes people do good things for the wrong reasons.
The Palestine exception.
Sorry.
and Jonathan, you've been so outspoken about the one-state solution as
Yeah.
outlined in your book, Beyond the Two-State Solution. I wonder if you could just talk about how we continue to push for that in the midst of a genocide.
Okay. My book, the Beyond the Two-State Solution, basically arose out of the political deadlock, even before October 7, between the Zionist movement that wanted to create a state as Jewish as France is French, and the Palestinian nationalist movement, which says Palestine Arabiya, who are all these foreigners coming to take over my land. And these two movements are mutually exclusive. Let's be clear about that. The possibility of a geographic compromise along the 67 lines, which is the two-state solution, which is something I worked very hard to see implemented, unfortunately could not work, precisely because Israel undermined it at every level by building Jewish settlements all over the West Bank and making that position no longer workable. So I said, is there another solution? And the other solution is what we have today. There actually is only one state today between the river and the sea. And that state is Israel. Whether they formally annex or don't formally annex areas of the West Bank is irrelevant. In that state, there are about 7 million Jews and about 7 million non-Jews, Arabs. Can they live together? Is it possible for them to live together? Can they coexist? And my answer is absolutely yes. But they can only exist if they are willing to give up their exclusivity, their claim that this is only ours and the others don't exist. They are illegitimate. They should have no vote. They should have no rights. They should have no existence. In fact, if possible, they should be pushed out and kept out. Either party would love to do that to the other party. I'm not saying it's only the Jews. Palestinians would love to have no more Zionists in their land, but they know that that cannot happen. And so they accept the reality that these people live there. But we want to live in conditions of equality, not exclusivity. Yes, we want a Palestinian state, but we recognize that that state is going to have at least half of its citizens who are not Palestinian, who are Jewish. Yes, maybe they want a Jewish state, but they have to recognize that half the people in their Jewish state are not Jews. So the state has to be both Jewish and Arab, has to satisfy the basic needs of both groups. And it can. This is what I wrote in my little book, Beyond the Two-State Solution. I urge you to read it. You can buy copies of it here in the back, or you can download it for free from the Nonviolence International Center, nonviolenceinternational.net. You can download it for free, or you can order it through, hate to say it, Amazon, but it is available. It also has a nice little executive summary in the back if you don't like to read a lot. In 8 or 10 pages, you can get the essence of how it's possible for Jews and Arabs to live together. You know, we've lived together for 13 centuries. Until this past centuries, Jews and Arabs lived together quite well. Quite well. Quite well. The big problems of anti-Jewish hatred and discrimination and racism are mostly a Western Christian phenomena. It's, you know, the pogroms did not take place in Damascus, but in Poland and Russia. And the Inquisition took place in Spain, not in Cairo. And the Holocaust, of course, took place in Germany, not in the Middle East. It is possible for us to live together. It's a lie that we've always been enemies. We haven't. And we can be able to live together again, but only as equals, not as lords and masters over slaves who have no rights. Question?
No, I'm saying that's a good way to end it.
That's a good way to end it. Okay, thank you very much. Please, if you haven't already, join our newsletter at fosna, FOSNA.com, and certainly subscribe to the museum's newsletter. Thank you, museum, for this wonderful event. And we appreciate all of you, and we appreciate everybody out there who has attended online. Thank you.
We had 165 people online.
165 people online. Wonderful.
In 30 countries.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for being here. We so appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Please feel free to hang out and look at the museum.
If anybody hasn't signed up, you can sign up. Sign up.
If you want to buy anything from the museum here, you know, items for sale, let me know. I'll be in the back there processing.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good job. Very nice.
.org. It's that .org.
FOSNA, Fosna.
Yeah.
.org. Well, you can just sign up there. Really easy. Well,
I said to them, that's what
One other connection.
yes, yes,
She's a student of mine from part of the seminary.
Oh, really?
Wonderful. So, you have a little hand in education. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I see it's on the truck.
I did not mind coming. This time it was about law.
I want, are you going back to Jerusalem soon?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Do you have connection or connect with, Reverend Munther, I think Reverend Hassan? He's been, as I said before,
It
right?
has been. We brought him here for a tour and again, yes.
Is it up the tour or something coming back in DC and Connecticut? Or what is it?
Yes, we always try to grab him because he's becoming something of a celebrity.
Yes.
Yes, it is possible.
Wasn't he interviewed by Tucker Carlson?
He was amazing. And Tucker was very respectful and gave him a possibility to speak.
Because a while ago, it's actually the New Haven, resolution. There was an idea to actually having him speak. Board of Aldermen. It's kind of, was he here? I don't think so, but it was an idea. Yeah, obviously, especially because the chair of that Board of Aldermen And also in DC, there's obviously a lot of Congress. Could be.
Well, we'll certainly keep that in mind next time, because I think we're going to be coming for a crisis, the checkpoint conference in. I can, if you send me an email, I'll tell you exactly what we're gonna tell them. And also we can have them.
I'm thinking of both DC and Connecticut. I don't know how the television's on. Okay. Because also I go to DC, I was gonna say the whole group, but Doctors Against Genocide, they have a lot of international DC.
Yes.
And July 16th, I think the next one. So I think people want to go, they do exactly what you said. They actually got listed at a conference. Rubio was speaking.
Good for them.
Yeah, they may do what you asked. We protest at the cafeteria. I've been at this box.
On your card.
You sign. Okay, so this one, if you could sign this one, I said J, or it would just be my.
Krista, I think we're gonna end this. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I was just waiting for you to come back. So thank you
Thank you,
again, and it was a
everyone.
great program. And look forward to seeing you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. So